Alright, so today we're going to take a look at my Mandalorian gauntlets. I've recently upgraded them to a new platform. I put them onto a 3D printed gauntlet instead of the Warbler gauntlet that I've used. But before we look at the new version, we'll take a look at the older version that I had been using for about 2 years. So this has already been stripped down of all of its weaponry and everything that I had on it, and we'll just take a quick look at the construction and how I had done it. I had used Warbler, which is a thermoplastic, which means you can use a heat gun to heat it up and form it into shape. That is what I primarily used for this. I used some craft foam on the inside as well, very similar to the stuff you'd find in a hobby store, right? I think I ended up using 2mm on the inside, maybe even 3, and wrapped it between 2 layers of Warbler to give it a little bit more depth. The nice thing about this is it is very lightweight and also really resilient to BB strikes. That is because the material itself has a little bit of give to it. So unlike other armors that you might try to wear for airsofting, the thermoplastic, especially when you got that foam on the inside, will take a BB strike and then rebound back into shape. That is a very nice feature of this stuff. It's the reason why I used it for so long. But after about 2 years, it was time for an upgrade. I had drilled holes into this thing, repatched it as I was applying new and different forms of weaponry to the gauntlets. So it was time to move on to a different version. You'll notice on the gauntlet is it used industrial Velcro to help keep it closed. And then I actually ended up using some of these thinner Velcro straps later on to basically wrap around and hold it in place. They held out decently okay, but by the end here, all the Velcro had worn out too much, and it started to fail. And then I also used this foam as well on the inside to help hold the gauntlet in place. I'm going to be doing that again with the next version, but I'm going to show you the stuff that I'm using for that instead. So this is the foam that I'm going to be using to help keep that gauntlet seated in place when it's on my arm. It is the Duct Tape Max Strength Expanding Foam Seal. I will be using it in little patches like this instead of doing a full seal around the arm. The main reason for that is to improve the airflow. This is a open cell foam, which means that it is breathable, it's porous, so it'll take in water, it'll take in whatever else. For the meantime, it does have that airflow into it. Also is extremely collapsible, so this can grow as big as an inch like you can see here, and it can shrink down to like 1/4 of an inch or smaller. It's really good at moving with you, but also trying to stay formed to your arm. So it's really good in the gauntlet to keep form fitted to yourself. Comes in like a 13-foot long reel, enough for multiple projects if you end up using it. I would recommend using some JB Weld on that as the actual adhesive, so it will bond to the PLA plastic a lot better. And I actually am going to be cutting this down so it's about 1/2 of an inch instead of the full inch thick, because I really don't need to fight a full inch around the gauntlet here in order to try to get in to this gauntlet. That 1/2 inch will be more than enough to stay affixed onto my arm and not move around. The one thing you'll notice is some parts on here where the paint and everything is worn away. I would go back in and I'd fill that in with like a chrome. I have some right here. These chrome pens, you could use that just to touch it up, and it gives it that look that the paint has weared away and the chrome is being shown, or the armor is being shown underneath. But over time it just keeps wearing away and keeps going away, and that's going to be the case of basically any armor you're wearing out there, unless you're actually using real steel or real metal. You're always going to get that wear away. With that being said, if I were to redo a Warbler gauntlet, I definitely would use black Warbler instead, as it wore away, it would just show as a black instead of this tan or beige. That is the normal Warbler color. It's a little bit more expensive for the black, but I think it would pay off in the long run, as you wouldn't have to go back and do as many touch-ups over time on it. So let's look at the new upgrades here. So these are 3D printed versions. They are PLA. If I would have done it again, if I would have done it a different way, I probably would have gone with resin instead. Main reason that I would have done that is resin itself has a higher deformation point, somewhere around like 140 degrees Fahrenheit, where the deformation temperature of PLA is a little bit lower. So even if you're getting up in like 110 degrees, it might start to warp. So if any of you airsofters out there know, most of the time your gear is sitting in a car or sitting in a back of a vehicle as you're traveling, moving around. So will risk deformation. So I'll probably just have to keep a closer eye on that and where I'm storing these in the future. But if I would have done it all again, I probably would have had them printed in resin. It would be a little bit more expensive. I got these particular ones from Maker Baked on Etsy. I will link it down in the description there for you guys to check out. But the big thing with these is you obviously get a more Canon look out of them, right? They look more authentic than a homemade bracer would. I've mounted on the Shogun's 20mm shotgun shell launcher. These are CO2 powered. I like them a lot more than the green gas ones because these have a lot more kick to them. They got a little bit more firepower to them. Even with these, they kind of are like a party popper, so they almost have like a range of, I would say, closer to 30 feet than anything further than that you're just gonna miss. The main reason that is you got such a short barrel that the acceleration from that and the grouping from that is going to be very low, versus if you've seen my double-barreled shotgun pistol, that has a much longer barrel, so I have more range with that and tighter groupings with that as well. But as a last resort, I'm out of ammo, kind of fun side trick, I've got that mounted just on the side there. And how I did that is I have 2 screws here to go through the gauntlet itself and then mount itself on the inside. It's just as easy as that. I used a Dremel and cut off the bottom part of this. This is usually what would attach to a rail. I just sidestepped that completely, drilled my own 2 holes in there that closed the profile down on it quite a bit so it could sit on the side of the gauntlet there. And then I added in the GoPro remote onto here so I can control my GoPro from the gauntlet. Test again your foam layout, because you don't want too much, and what I'll end up doing on the gauntlet here itself is placing patches of foam instead of a full circle of foam. That will allow a little bit more airflow through the gauntlet so it doesn't overheat as much. That was kind of an issue that I had with the Warbler, is it would get nice and soupy in there because there was no airflow. Here is the 3D printed knife that I have installed on here. It is plastic as well, PLA, so I had got this on Etsy as well. I'll put the link in the description for this also, so you guys can take a look there and check it out. But this is going to be attached to the gauntlet, and the cord here, I just use this thin Velcro again that you've seen before. That holds in place really nice. Instead of like using a plastic ring or something else, this is very form-fitting. It doesn't get into the way when you're trying to use your hand. But really all you have to do is bend the wrist down, the blade comes out, and bend the wrist again all the way down, and the blade comes back in. It's a very smooth function. I've moved it over to the right gauntlet instead of the left. And the left-hand gauntlet, I used to run the grenade launcher on my right hand, and really had to, if I wanted to use it, I would have to drop my weapon, or move my weapon to my offhand, use the gauntlet, and then transfer my weapon back into my firing hand or shoot offhanded with it. This way I'll be able to just take the gauntlet, and with the one-hand remote there, I'll be able to just point and fire. When I moved it to the left, I also needed to move the sight over to the other side. It wasn't really made for that, as it was supposed to be attached to a Picatinny, and I had Picatinny on this side, and it can only have Picatinny attached on one side. So what I ended up doing is I ended up drilling into the launcher itself and mounting some screws on the inside of the launcher, dremeling out some space in there for those screws so they're recessed so it doesn't get away of the action of the grenade launcher here. The nice thing here too is now the grenade launcher on this bad boy is recessed into the gauntlet a little bit more, so it doesn't look as intrusive as it did before. Before it was just kind of sitting on top of the gauntlet. Now it's recessed in. It looks more like it's part of it, like it was, this is the function it was made to do, was to be a rocket launcher or grenade launcher. I'll go into just a little bit more detail on a skip screen here. I recorded it before I installed it into the gauntlet, so I'm going to go ahead and flip over to that real quick and just give a quick layout of this grenade launcher. So first and foremost, it is a Thor power-up launcher. It is a consistent launcher, and you can see that I've done a little custom job here in order to make it fire with the thumb depress on a single hand versus using two hands to operate it. The nice thing about it, right, is it's very durable. It's obviously made for airsoft to begin with. A little bit heavier, but like I said, it is very consistent in how it operates. The reason that I went with this is it has its own mechanism built into the back of it. When you prime it, that when you would pull the trigger normally on this weapon, it would engage the mechanism inside and it would allow the pin to pop out and strike very hard and with a lot of force the back of the grenade pin. And with a lot of airsoft grenades, if you're not having that hard direct impact on the back of it, it's either going to fail, it's going to break prematurely, the grenade itself. So I wanted something that I could use reliably in the field and have a mechanism built onto it that was both robust, and I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere because this is already made for airsoft. It's already very sturdy. So in there you can see the chamber, it goes down, you got a little pin there, pops up, and then when you press the thumb, it engages that pin on it. It's durable, relatively lightweight because we've taken off a lot of the other fixtures on here. The original system here, this is where the handle sits. You just unscrew a bottom in the bottom of the grip. I cut off this part here, which would connect over to the grip itself, and that kind of protected the release pin, but also protected that trigger. But since we removed the trigger completely from this unit, basically on the inside here, this is just a brake bike cable, and I added on some little dubers on the end here in order. So it's got the cable from inside the bike cable that runs on the inside, and it basically engages. Normally when you pull the trigger, it would engage this little part down below that fires the mechanism on the inside. We've just kind of used some thermoplastic here, locked that into place, and then ran this over so whenever you depress the thumb switch, fires the mechanism. That's a little bit of a look into the Thor power-up launcher. Unfortunately, I don't have the extra parts, so I couldn't show you the disassembly. But really, you're just taking off the screws on the bottom, and it'll strip it down to this level here. All right, and for the paint job here, I just went over it with a metallic paint primer. This Rust-Oleum Universal is what I used for the base coat. Went over, did that a couple times. Then I used the toothpaste method. If you guys aren't familiar with that, it is where you literally just take some toothpaste. I used some Q-tips and I applied it to spots of the gauntlet where I wanted wear to apply to the gauntlet, where I wanted it to look like it was rubbed off or had chipped off. And after I applied all the toothpaste to it, I went over it with another coat of paint similar to the metallic. I just had like a rusted pot or something like that is what it was called for this color, but you can choose your own colors. This is just what matches my current armor scheme. I personally like using the earth tones or the darker tones. That way I don't completely stand out on the field. You're still going to have these little pops of silver that are going to stick out a little bit, but it's definitely better than walking around with a fresh coat of Beskar. After I did that, I wiped off all of the toothpaste, and that's where you're going to see these spots stick out and pop from where it looks like paint has chipped away. And then from there, I went over with a dusting of the flat Rust-Oleum, and then another coat of the brown, and that gives it a little bit of these splotches, these dust marks. I kind of like the look of that because it makes it look like, hey, you're either using your freaking jetpack flying around, you just got that road particle like you see on your car, or a freaking airplane or something. And then same thing on the backside here, just those splashes of brown in there that kind of gives it a little different story. Some people like to whitewash theirs with black to give that a little bit more of a tone down. I just use that dusting of those two different paints, and it works well, and it fits the rest of my armor paint as well. I had tried using some Flex Seal on this. Didn't work like I liked it, or didn't look like how I liked it, and I left some on here on the inside right here, and you can see it just gives it a kind of bubbly or uneven rubberish texture. So if that's kind of a texture you're looking for, go ahead, use the Flex Seal. The reason I tried to use it is I wanted to kind of coat the PLA with some additional protection, giving it a little coat of rubber to help withstand some BB strikes. I opted to peel off the stuff that I had tested on here for the majority of it. Over time, probably end up replacing the gauntlets again with something else, so it's always another step. Here is the clamshell opening. It uses just a pin through here that holds the armor together and creates a hinge. I don't know how well this is going to hold up. I'm probably just going to end up ordering some piano hinges and JB welding it in there. Same thing on the other side here too. These two clasps, I don't know how well those are going to hold up, so I'm kind of looking around right now for another backup system on how to close it. Basically, worst comes to worst, I'll probably just drill other couple holes here on the side, and I can just run a couple of zip ties through there. Worst case scenario, if this gives out or breaks on me, I always carry extra zip ties in my bag just in case. They can help fix just about everything. Another item I used was Sugru on the inside of the gauntlet here. I ran some of that Velcro around here for the remote, so I can pop that out if I need to. But on the inside here, I added that Sugru to give it some more layer. Along some of these gaps here, also use Sugru. Sugru is like a moldable glue, yeah, moldable glue right there, that you can use. It kind of comes out rubberish. Some people in Airsoft actually use this for hop-up nubs, or making their own patches, making their own R-hop patches with this stuff. So it has multiple applications. I always try to keep a bunch of these around because they're very useful, especially if you're trying to close gaps in your armor or certain areas, or you want to try to waterproof some stuff in certain ways. You can definitely use it like that. I used it on the inside here to help raise this up so that the GoPro remote had an additional ledge to sit on. Currently it's sitting on top of the blade that's still in here. but I wanted it to sit level, so I added that Sugru onto there. For mounting the blade on the inside, I just cut out right along here with the Dremel and inserted the blade in here, and I used screws running up, some machine bolts in here running up as posts so it doesn't move around. The one thing with this is if it moves around too much or it has too much bend, say your arm is in here and you bend it too much, the blade isn't going to work right. So this will hold it in place and make sure, even if my arm's in here, if I'm crawling around, those screws are going to take the brunt force of the weight, and it's not going to move this knife around, so I can extend the knife whenever I need it to. And then the inside you can see there for the shotgun shell launcher. And we'll take a quick look in the side of this gauntlet just so you can see. Similar thing I did here, dremeled out the inside just a little bit at a time. You don't need to go crazy. You can always, you can always take away, but you can't always put back, so just keep that in mind. What I ended up using was just a Sharpie outlining where I thought I needed to cut out, and then I would cut down to that part with the Dremel and then lay it in there and see where it was hitting, where it was rubbing, and then I went back over with some Sugru and filled in the gaps if I ended up taking out too much. Same thing here, right here, that's Sugru right along this line here. And there I just did recess. If there was pull out the launcher, pull off the top here, and recess out a little part for a nail or a screw to go in on the side. So I have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's holding it into the gauntlet, and that's not going to go anywhere. Sugru I used right here because I needed something that was a little bit more forgiving and flexible. So I put a Sugru patch on the inside, and that was just so you can't really see as well through here. When you prime the handle here, it can actually move the Sugru a little bit in order to sit flush. And when it's in this down position, it is basically, its safety is on. It's not going to be able to fire. And as soon as this comes up, even this much, it will be able to fire, and you're going to see the pin pop out there. So that's the version, I don't know, 4 or 5, whatever it is at this point, of my Mandalorian gauntlets. Some other things that I may do in the future with this is I may change this into a wrist activated system. So by kind of like with this bad boy where I pull my wrist down to a certain point, it will activate it. Same thing with this. I'll play around with that a little bit. Not sure if I'm gonna like it more or less, but it would definitely reduce the amount of stuff that I have in my hand, because I basically keep this in my, now it will be in my offhand at all times. So it would be nice just to be able to bend my wrist to be able to activate the grenade launcher. A little bit more risky, obviously, if I'm using tagging rounds. This is a lot safer, a lot harder to activate than, say, me just bending my wrist too much and me shooting a tagging round off at somebody. So that is the update on the launcher. If you guys have any questions, if you guys, girls, have any questions about how to do this yourself, or if you're trying to do it and you're running into an obstacle, feel free to post down below with your questions. If you have any of your own designs that you need help getting live and you need some suggestions on how to do it, feel free to comment as well. I'll try to help you out as much as I can. Until next time, call your hits.